I didn't find out my relationship was over through a phone call. I didn't hear it from a friend. I didn't even hear it from him. I found out because my boyfriend posted date night with Bay, and the arm around him wasn't mine. I was sitting alone in a hotel room in Seattle, halfway through a software deployment I'd been preparing for months. The kind of work trip that drains you quietly. Early mornings, client presentations, coffee that never quite tastes right. I remember kicking off my shoes, collapsing onto the edge of the bed, and opening Instagram without thinking. Just a mindless scroll before heading back into the grind. That's when I saw it. His photo, my boyfriend. The man I'd been with for 3 years. The man I lived with. He was sitting in a dimly lit steakhouse, wearing the jacket I'd bought him last winter, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. His arm was wrapped around another woman. Casual, intimate, practiced, like it belonged there. The caption was cheerful, effortless. Date night with Bay. I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen mid-scroll, my pulse loud in my ears. I checked the username twice, like maybe my brain was glitching, like maybe this was someone else's life bleeding into mine by mistake. It wasn't. I noticed the details next. The red dress she was wearing, the one I had bought for our anniversary, the restaurant, Morton's, the expensive one, the kind of place you don't accidentally end up at. And the woman beside him? Not a stranger. His work mentor. The woman he'd assured me was happily married. The one he said was basically family. Her face was tilted toward him, soft, admiring. His wedding ring, if he was wearing one, was conveniently out of frame. The post already had over 100 likes. Then I saw the comments. His sister had written, "You two are perfect together." That's when something inside me went quiet. Not numb, not broken, just still. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I didn't ask for an explanation. Because in that moment, I realized something important. He hadn't made a mistake. He'd made a decision. And I was done pretending I didn't see it. We didn't start out dramatic. That's the thing people never understand when a relationship implodes publicly. They assume it was always loud, always unstable, always headed for disaster. Ours wasn't. It was quiet, ordinary, solid in a way that felt grown up. I met him 3 years earlier at a friend's birthday party I almost skipped. I'd had a long week at work, and every instinct told me to go home, put on sweatpants, and call it self-care. I went anyway. He was there, leaning against the kitchen counter, talking to someone about software like it was a language he loved, not just a job. He laughed easily, asked thoughtful questions, didn't try too hard. We talked for an hour that night, then 2. Then we realized the party had ended and we were still standing there, alone in someone else's apartment, finishing a conversation that didn't feel finished yet. He walked me to my car, asked for my number in a way that wasn't slick, just hopeful. Our first date was coffee. Nothing fancy. We talked about work, families, the places we wanted to travel someday. He listened when I spoke, really listened, the way that makes you feel like your thoughts have weight. I remember thinking, this feels easy, not boring, easy. Within a year, we were inseparable. We moved in together 18 months before everything blew up. His condo, clean lines, neutral colors, a place that felt like adulthood. We blended our lives the way couples do when they assume permanence. Shared groceries, inside jokes, routines that form without discussion. Sunday mornings became ours. Grocery shopping. Cooking dinner together while music played low in the background. From the outside, we looked steady. Before my Seattle trip, nothing felt off enough to question. He kissed me goodbye at the airport, squeezed my hand like he always did when he didn't want to say something out loud, texted me after security. Miss you already? I smiled like an idiot at my phone. We texted every day I was gone. Little updates, complaints about traffic, photos of his lunch. He asked me to bring him back that fancy coffee from Pike Place, the one he liked but never bought for himself. I added it to my mental checklist without thinking. Of course I would. There were no screaming fights in our past, no dramatic ultimatums, no infidelity rumors, just trust, or what I thought was trust. His family knew about me, but in a filtered way. His parents were deeply religious, old school, strict, the kind of people who believed appearances mattered as much as truth. They still thought we slept in separate bedrooms, thought he attended church more regularly than he did, thought a lot of things that weren't real. I knew he lied to them. I didn't love it, but I told myself it wasn't my fight. Everyone has complicated parents. Everyone picks their battles. The woman from the photo, his mentor, had been around for over a year, work dinners, late meetings, inside jokes I wasn't part of but was told not to worry about. She was married, after all, had kids, a life, a boundary, supposedly. I trusted that. I trusted him. Looking back, there were moments I brushed past too quickly. Times he guarded his phone just a little more tightly. Conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. Small things, the kind you don't question when you believe in the foundation underneath you. Because when you believe you're building something real, you don't assume it's optional. You don't imagine that 4 days into a business trip, your entire relationship can be rewritten in a single Instagram post. And you definitely don't imagine finding out like that, publicly, casually, as if your place in his life was already gone. The thing about warning signs is that they're almost never loud. They don't show up waving red flags or announcing themselves as danger. They arrive quietly, disguised as reasonable explanations, wrapped in trust you don't want to question. And when you love someone, you become very good at explaining things away. I didn't suddenly wake up one day suspicious of him. It happened in pieces, moments that felt insignificant on their own, but heavier in hindsight. There were the late dinners that started becoming routine. Work thing, he'd say, shrugging out of his jacket. Mentorship stuff, you know how it is. I'd nod because I did know how it was. Careers demand time. Ambition doesn't punch a clock. Sometimes he'd come home energized in a way that didn't match exhaustion. Other nights, distracted, present in the room, absent in the conversation. I'd talk about my day and watch his eyes drift, not unkindly, just elsewhere. His phone never left his side anymore. Not face down, not hidden, just close. On the couch, on the counter, on the nightstand, always within reach. If a notification buzzed, he'd glance before responding, fingers moving fast, screen tilted away by habit rather than intention. I noticed it, I didn't confront it, because there was always an explanation ready. She was his mentor, older, married. A professional line I told myself existed because it had to, because the alternative would mean questioning a version of him I wasn't ready to see. There was one night, weeks before my trip, when I mentioned her casually over dinner, just a passing comment. You've been seeing her a lot lately. He didn't get defensive. That should have reassured me. Instead, he smiled, easy, confident. You don't have anything to worry about, he said, like he'd rehearsed it. She's going through some stuff with her husband. I'm just being supportive. Supportive. The word lodged somewhere in my chest. I told myself that's what good people do. They show up. They help. They don't abandon friends when things get messy. I didn't want to be the girlfriend who policed compassion. So I swallowed the discomfort. Another time, I noticed a new shirt in his closet. Expensive. Not something I remembered buying. When I asked about it, he said it was a gift from work, some recognition thing. I didn't question it. I should have noticed how carefully he avoided details. There were moments when I caught myself almost asking more, and then stopping. Because the relationship felt stable, because 3 years carries weight, because when you've invested time, love, shared space, you don't want to believe it's fragile. Before I left for Seattle, everything felt normal. We packed my suitcase together. He handed me socks I'd forgotten. I teased him about overpacking. He stood behind me in the doorway while I checked my passport, arms loose around my waist. Familiar, comfortable. At the airport, he kissed my forehead, then my mouth, held my face like he meant it. Text me when you land, he said. I will. And I did. The first few days were exactly what they always were when we were apart. Good mornings, quick check-ins, casual updates. Nothing alarming, nothing urgent. Just the rhythm of two people who assumed they were on the same page. That's the part that still messes with me. Because there was no fight before the photo, no ultimatum, no conversation that explained what came next. Just a slow accumulation of things I didn't question, until the moment I couldn't ignore them anymore. The Instagram post didn't come out of nowhere. It came at the end of a trail I'd been walking for months, convincing myself it led somewhere safe. The photo didn't just hurt because it existed. It hurt because of how effortless it was. I remember sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, phone glowing in my hand, rereading the caption like it might rearrange itself into something harmless if I stared long enough. Date night with Bay. No explanation. No ambiguity. No attempt to hide. It wasn't a private message I'd stumbled across. It wasn't a rumor whispered by someone else. It was public, confident, intentional. I scrolled back up and down, my mind cataloging details I hadn't noticed at first. The lighting, the angle, the way his body leaned toward her, The fact that her head was tilted slightly, like she was being admired, and knew it. I checked the timestamp. 4 days into my trip. 4 days after he'd kissed me goodbye at the airport. My first instinct was pure volcanic impulse. Call him. Demand answers. Let the shock spill out of me in words I'd regret later. I could already hear my own voice, tight and shaking, asking questions I didn't actually want answers to. Then something else cut through the noise. His parents. I don't know why that thought came so clearly, so suddenly. Maybe because they'd always been a presence in our relationship, looming, judgmental, carefully curated around lies he maintained without blinking. They still thought we slept in separate bedrooms, still believed he attended church regularly, still had no idea how much of his life existed outside the version he presented to them. They'd once made us sit through a 2-hour lecture about living in sin when they found out we'd moved in together. He'd apologized afterward, for them, not for the deception. And suddenly I realized something that made my hands stop shaking. He had built 2 realities, one with me, one with them, and he was counting on me to protect both. I didn't call him. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then another. I opened Facebook and searched for his mother's profile. It wasn't hard to find. She posted Bible verses every morning at exactly 6 a.m., without fail. Sunrise devotionals. Carefully framed faith. I stared at her profile picture for a long moment. A smiling family portrait, perfectly pressed clothes, appearances intact. Then I attached the screenshot and typed a single message. Mrs. Morrison, I thought you should see what your son posted while I'm away on business. I'll be handling our living situation when I return. I signed my name. I didn't add commentary. I didn't explain. I sent it. The moment it left my phone, my chest tightened, not with regret, but with certainty, the kind that settles in after a decision has already been made. Then I called the airline. I changed my flight to come home a week early. It cost me $400. I didn't hesitate. Some things are worth paying for. Next, I booked a U-Haul for pickup the morning I landed. Then I called a friend, someone who'd been sleeping on his brother's couch after his own breakup. I explained the situation in as few words as possible. There's about to be a vacancy, I said. Interested? He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. After that, I muted my boyfriend's number. Not blocked, muted. I still had work to do, a deployment to finish, clients to face. I wasn't about to let his choices derail my professionalism. So I went back to work, presented like nothing had happened, answered questions, nodded through meetings while my phone buzzed endlessly in my pocket. The first text came less than 2 hours later. What did you do? Then another. My mom is freaking out. My dad is driving here right now. Then a flood. This isn't what it looks like. She's going through a divorce. I was just being supportive. You had no right to involve my parents. Please call me. This is manipulative. You're ruining my life over a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. By the end of the night, there were dozens of missed calls, voicemails I didn't listen to, messages that swung wildly between panic, anger, and accusation. Later, he posted a story. Black screen, white text. When someone you love betrays your trust by trying to turn your family against you. I laughed out loud. A short, sharp sound that surprised even me. The next morning, the narrative shifted again. Another post. Softer, carefully worded, damage control. Yes, I had dinner with a friend who's going through a hard time. No, I didn't cheat. Some people just want to create drama where there isn't any. Comments flooded in. Supportive, indignant. Men are so insecure. He sounds controlling. You deserve better. That was the moment I almost broke. Almost. Then I remembered the dress. The anniversary dress. You don't wear that to comfort a friend. I saved the post for later. By the time my plane landed, I felt hollowed out in a very specific way. Not numb, not shattered. Focused. The kind of calm that only shows up after you've already grieved something quietly and decided you're done begging it to survive. My phone had stopped buzzing sometime late Friday night. No texts, no posts, no calls. The silence was worse than the chaos that came before it. Silence meant strategy. Silence meant he'd realized panic wasn't working. Saturday morning, I walked off the plane with my carry-on in one hand and my shoulders squared like I was stepping into a meeting I'd prepared for. He was there at baggage claim. Not alone. I saw him before he saw me. Standing too straight, scanning faces, flanked by his sister and, unbelievably, her, the mentor. The woman from the photo. The one whose arm he'd been wrapped around like a replacement he assumed I'd tolerate. When he spotted me, his face broke open with relief and desperation, all at once. He rushed toward me, I sidestepped. The movement was small, but it landed hard. Please, he said, voice cracking. Just let me explain. The woman stepped forward instead, confident, calm, like she belonged there. This is all a misunderstanding, she said, smiling tightly. We're just friends. I'm going through a rough divorce, and he's been supportive. I looked at her, then at him. How does your husband feel about your support system? I asked. Her smile faltered. We're separated, she said quickly. Since when? She hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. That's personal. I nodded slowly. Was it personal when you had your arm around my boyfriend at Morton's? His sister jumped in immediately. Oh my God, it was just a photo. You're being so dramatic. Dramatic, I repeated calmly, is posting date night pictures with another woman while your girlfriend is out of town working. I'm being practical. Tears streamed down his face now. Real ones. Messy. He reached for me again. Can we please just go home and talk? You can, I said. I'm going to mine. He froze. What's that supposed to mean? I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder. Check with your parents. They seem very concerned about your living situation. I walked away. They followed me all the way to the parking garage, his sister shouting about toxicity, the woman hovering behind him like she'd already won something, him trying to negotiate in whispers, like volume might save him dignity. At my car, he grabbed my arm. You can't kick me out, he said. I have rights. I looked down at his hand, then back at his face. You're not on the lease, I said evenly. You're a month-to-month guest. I pulled a folded document from my bag and handed it to him. Here's your 30-day notice. His face drained of color. You're evicting me? I came prepared, I said. For the first time since Seattle, he looked truly afraid. I drove straight from the airport to the U-Haul pickup. My friend met me there with 2 others. No questions. Just muscle and quiet understanding. When we pulled up to the condo, he was already there. On the balcony, phone raised, recording. I'm documenting this harassment, he shouted down. My friend looked at me. Is he serious? Very. Inside, he'd barricaded himself in the bedroom. We packed my things. Everything I'd paid for. The couch, the dining table, the TV, the entertainment center, the kitchen appliances, the bedroom furniture, except the bed. I wasn't cruel, just done. When he heard the TV being disconnected, he burst out of the bedroom. You can't take that. We watch Netflix on it. One of my friend's buddies lifted his phone. This is going on TikTok, right? Please don't, I said quietly. He called the police. Of course he did. When they arrived, he ran to them crying, shaking, accusing. They're stealing everything. The older officer looked tired before he even spoke. Is your name on the lease? No. Did you purchase these items? We bought them together. I showed receipts. Every single one. My name, my card. The younger officer nodded. She has every right to remove her property. That's when his father arrived. Suit pressed. Expression tight. Authority embodied. He took one look at the scene and said my full name like a warning. We stepped aside. I don't approve of your method, he said quietly. I don't approve of being cheated on, I replied. He hesitated, then asked, would you tolerate this behavior from my wife? No, he said after a pause. I didn't think so. He nodded once. I'll handle him. And for the first time since this began, I exhaled. If I thought the worst was over once his father stepped in, I was wrong. That conversation on the sidewalk didn't end anything. It triggered everything. His father left that day with the promise that his son would be out within the week. He said it the way men like him say things when they expect obedience. Calm, final, authoritative. But entitlement doesn't disappear just because it's been confronted. It mutates. The first few days after moving day were loud, emotionally, not physically. My phone stayed quiet, but his social media exploded. Post after post about starting over, about finding strength, about escaping emotional abuse. The comments were relentless. You're so brave. Some people can't handle strong women. Believe survivors. I watched it all from a distance, screenshots piling up in a folder on my laptop. Dates, times, locations, every story tagged from my condo, every photo taken from my balcony, every wine glass raised in celebration of his so-called freedom, while he was still squatting in my home. 3 days in, the tactic changed. That's when she started showing up again. Her car appeared in my assigned parking spot overnight, groceries carried up together, stories posted from my living room like it already belonged to her. She made sure the captions were vague but suggestive. New beginnings, safe places, healing energy. My friend texted me. She's trying to make you jealous. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Me, she's making my eviction case easier. Because every overnight stay violated the lease. Every tagged location contradicted his abuse narrative. Every smiling photo undermined the victimhood he was selling online. I documented everything. By day 5, the entitlement crystallized into paperwork. I received a demand letter from a lawyer I'd never heard of. He was claiming unlawful eviction, emotional distress, shared ownership of furniture, 3 months of living expenses, return of gifts, and $15,000 in damages. I forwarded it to my cousin, a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. He called me immediately. He didn't even say hello before he started laughing. "She wants money for gifts," he said between breaths, "while she's illegally occupying your place?" "She does." "This is incredible," he said. "Can I frame this?" He drafted a response that same afternoon. Formal, surgical. Attached my documentation. Included a court date for formal eviction proceedings. That's when my ex went nuclear. He called my workplace. Told HR I was emotionally unstable, that I'd been making threats, that I was dangerous. Fortunately for me, I'd anticipated escalation. I'd already told my boss everything when I got back from Seattle. Calmly, professionally, with receipts, screenshots, timelines, proof. HR flagged the call as harassment. Then he tried LinkedIn, a public post about surviving narcissistic abuse in the tech industry, about powerful women being silenced. He didn't name me, but every mutual connection knew exactly who he meant. I didn't write a rebuttal. I commented with a single screenshot. The date night photo. No caption. The post disappeared within the hour. That's when he crossed the line that changed everything. He told his parents I'd been abusive, physically abusive. His father called me immediately. No anger, just controlled urgency. "He's made serious accusations," he said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend emotionally. I checked my calendar. "The date he's claiming?" I said. "I was in Seattle. Here are my flight records, hotel receipts, presentation schedule, 40 witnesses." There was a long pause. "I see," his father said quietly. "He needs help," I replied. "We'll be there tomorrow." The next morning, his parents arrived with a moving truck and 3 men from their church. My ex tried to refuse them entry. His mother smiled sweetly and said, "Honey, you can pack your things like a lady, or we'll pack them for you, but you're leaving this home today." He tried to argue. She cut him off. "We're also canceling your phone plan, your car insurance, and that credit card you thought we didn't know about." His face cycled through disbelief, panic, rage, and finally defeat. That's when his mentor showed up. She pulled into the lot, saw his father standing there, and didn't even get out of the car. She drove away. No goodbye, no explanation, no loyalty. Inside the condo, my ex collapsed. Not theatrically, genuinely. Ugly, broken sobs that sounded like reality crashing in all at once. They packed his things in under 2 hours. At the door, he stopped and turned to me. "I did love you," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "You loved what I provided," I said. "There's a difference." His father placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him out. The door closed. The condo went silent. And for the first time in weeks, the air felt breathable. The silence after they left wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you aware of every small sound, my own breathing, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside. The condo felt unfamiliar without the chaos. Like a stage after the actors have exited, props still scattered, lights still on. I stood in the middle of the living room and realized something unsettling. I had been in survival mode for weeks. Adrenaline had carried me through Seattle, through screenshots, through lawyers and police officers and eviction notices, through confrontation after confrontation where I didn't let myself feel anything fully, because feeling would have slowed me down. Now there was nothing left to do, and that's when it hit. Not all at once, not dramatically. It crept in through small things. I opened the closet and saw the empty space where his jackets used to hang. I found a mug in the sink he'd forgotten to pack, one I'd bought on a trip years ago, chipped at the rim. I picked it up, then froze, unsure whether to wash it or throw it away. My hands started shaking. I sat down on the couch, what was left of it, and stared at the blank wall where the TV used to be. For the first time since this began, my chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with anger. Grief finally found me. Not for him. For the version of my life I thought I was living. For the future I'd assumed was quietly forming around us. Shared routines stretching into years. Conversations we'd never have now. A stability that turned out to be conditional. For how easily I'd trusted, how confidently I'd believed in something that didn't exist the way I thought it did. I replayed moments in my head that hurt differently now. The way he'd smiled when he said, You don't have anything to worry about. The ease with which he'd lied, to me, to his parents, to himself. The fact that he hadn't panicked when I left for Seattle, hadn't clung, hadn't hesitated. He'd already detached. I sank to the floor without realizing it, back against the cabinet, knees drawn up, breath shallow. There were no sobs, no dramatic collapse, just tears slipping down silently, one after another, like my body finally exhaling something it had been holding in for years. I wondered when it stopped being mutual, when I became a convenience instead of a choice. The worst thought, the one I hated myself for having, was this. If he hadn't posted that photo, how much longer would this have gone on? Would I have married him, defended him to friends, protected his image while he lived a parallel life? That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, because it meant the photo wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the interruption. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every shadow exaggerated in the dark. My phone sat untouched on the nightstand. No more texts, no more calls, no more chaos demanding my attention. Just my own thoughts. I thought about the way his parents had taken control so quickly once the truth was undeniable. How authority mattered to him more than honesty. How consequences had finally landed not because he understood, but because he couldn't escape them. I hated that part. I hated that closure didn't come from accountability or remorse. It came from external pressure, from exposure, from losing comfort. Around 3 a.m, I got up and walked through the condo again, this time slower, more deliberately. I noticed how much space there was, how quiet it could be. I opened a window and let the night air in. Cool, clean, real. That's when something shifted. Not relief, not forgiveness. Clarity. I hadn't lost myself. I'd protected myself. The pain didn't mean I'd failed. It meant I'd finally stopped accepting something that was slowly eroding me. I hadn't reacted emotionally. I'd responded intentionally. And even in the wreckage, that mattered. Still, the darkness lingered. Because strength doesn't cancel heartbreak. It just lets you survive it. And standing there in the quiet, surrounded by the aftermath of a life that had unraveled publicly and violently, I understood one final truth. This wasn't over yet. The fallout was coming. The turning point didn't arrive with a confrontation. There was no final argument, no dramatic confession, no moment where he suddenly understood what he'd done and apologized in a way that meant something. It arrived quietly, in the form of information. 2 mornings after the condo emptied out, I woke to a message request on Facebook from a woman I didn't know. Her profile picture showed her with 3 kids at a pumpkin patch, smiling, normal. Her name stopped me cold. She was the wife, the woman my ex's mentor claimed she was separated from, the marriage that was supposedly already over. I stared at the message for a long moment before opening it. Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. I hope this isn't inappropriate. I just wanted to say, thank you. I wasn't crazy. I sat down on the edge of the bed, phone heavy in my hands. She explained everything in careful, restrained sentences. How she'd suspected something for months. How she'd been told she was paranoid, insecure, imagining things. How the Instagram photo, that photo, had finally confirmed what she'd been trying not to believe. They weren't separated. They weren't divorcing yet. They were in counseling, trying to save their marriage. Her words were calm, but the devastation underneath them was unmistakable. She didn't ask me for details. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted acknowledgement that the truth existed, that she hadn't invented it in her head. I told her the truth. Not with embellishment, not with cruelty. Just facts. She thanked me again, said they were moving forward with the divorce, said she deserved honesty, even if it came painfully late. When I put my phone down, my hands were steady. Because for the first time, the entire picture snapped into focus. This hadn't been about confusion, or miscommunication, or a relationship that accidentally crossed a line. It had been deliberate. 2 women, 2 narratives, one man managing them both until he couldn't. And suddenly, everything made sense. The confidence of the post, the lack of panic when I left for Seattle, the way he'd tried to control the story instead of fixing the damage. I hadn't destroyed his life. I'd exposed it. That afternoon, his final legal threat disappeared. No follow-up from his lawyer. No court appearance. No demands. My cousin confirmed what I already suspected. Once his parents saw the full scope of the lies, they'd shut it down. No one was funding a lawsuit built on fiction. That was the moment my power fully returned. Not because I won, but because I no longer needed to fight. A few weeks later, I ran into him by accident. Target, of all places. He was with his parents, dressed conservatively, controlled, smaller somehow, like someone whose world had narrowed dramatically. When he saw me, he instinctively stepped forward. Then his father placed a hand on his shoulder. Firm, final. Guided him away. His mother nodded at me as they passed, not warmly, not coldly, respectfully. That nod mattered more than any apology he never gave. The last attempt came 3 weeks after that. A text from an unfamiliar number. I know you'll probably delete this. I just wanted you to know I'm in therapy now. I understand what I did was wrong. She wasn't worth losing you. I hope someday you can forgive me. I read it once, then again. And that's when I understood something crucial. He still didn't get it. It was never about her being worth it. It wasn't about choosing between two women. It was about respect, honesty, decency, about not treating a relationship like a placeholder while you audition replacements. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to clarify. The turning point wasn't him changing. It was me realizing I didn't need him to. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It unraveled slowly, in quiet confirmations that life was moving forward, just not in the direction he'd planned. 2 months passed. The drama burned itself out the way it always does when there's no one left feeding it. No more posts, no more vague captions, no more sympathetic comments from people who hadn't known the full story and no longer cared enough to keep asking. He moved back in with his parents, and in their house, moving back came with conditions. A curfew, mandatory church, twice on Sundays, once midweek, no overnight guests, no excuses. Therapy was non-negotiable, his father's rule. He'd been consulting before, his word for barely working. That ended. He was expected to get a full-time job, contribute, be accountable in ways he'd avoided for years. The freedom he'd thought he was reclaiming collapsed into supervision. Meanwhile, the woman from the photo disappeared completely. Her name stopped circulating. Her social media went private. Mutual connections stopped mentioning her. I later heard, through the same quiet network gossip always travels, that she'd tried to explain things to her husband after the truth came out. It didn't work. She lost her marriage. He lost his comfort. And neither of them ended up with what they'd risked everything for. A few weeks after the dust settled, she reached out again, the wife. Not to reopen wounds, not to ask questions. Just to say thank you. She told me she doubted herself for so long that the confirmation felt surreal, that seeing the truth laid out plainly had been devastating, but also freeing. At least now I know I wasn't crazy, she wrote. Neither of us were. That realization stayed with me. There were still loose ends. His sister sent a few angry messages before I blocked her completely. Accusations about jealousy, about insecurity, about not being able to handle a strong woman. I almost replied once. Almost. Then I laughed. Because strength isn't deception, and independence isn't funded by someone else's credit card. My friend moved in officially, paid rent on time, cleaned up after himself, brought peace into a space that had been quietly tense for far too long. The condo felt different, lighter. It wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the absence of vigilance. I wasn't bracing myself anymore. I wasn't monitoring moods or reading between lines or wondering what version of reality I was living in. I could breathe. Work stabilized too. The promotion I'd been quietly working toward finally came through. Apparently, those Seattle presentations had landed better than I realized. Life didn't explode into joy overnight, but it settled, and sometimes that's better. The last time I saw him in person was unplanned. Target aisle, household goods. He looked smaller, less certain, like someone whose narrative had collapsed and hadn't been replaced yet. He started to approach, then stopped. His father's hand on his shoulder again. A silent boundary. They turned away. His mother gave me a brief nod, acknowledgement without apology, approval without affection. That was enough. The final message came the day before my promotion was announced. A new number. He said he was in therapy now, that he understood what he did was wrong, that he hoped someday I'd forgive him. I didn't respond, because forgiveness wasn't the point. Understanding was. And he still framed it as loss. She wasn't worth losing you. As if the problem had been choosing incorrectly rather than living dishonestly. I deleted the message, not angrily, decisively. The fallout wasn't dramatic. It was instructive. He learned what happens when you try to maintain two realities at once. I learned what happens when you stop protecting someone else's lies, and the consequences landed exactly where they belonged. The funny thing about revenge is that when it's real, it doesn't feel like revenge at all. There were no victory speeches. No dramatic closure conversations. No moment where I stood taller because he stood smaller. Life just corrected itself. The condo is quiet now in a way that feels intentional. Not empty, aligned. My days are steady. My nights are uninterrupted. My phone no longer feels like a threat in my pocket. No hidden notifications, no stories I have to decode, no double meanings disguised as reassurance. A while ago, I started dating again. Not because I needed to prove anything, not because I was lonely, but because I wanted to. I met someone at my climbing gym. He has his own place, pays his own bills, shows up when he says he will. Revolutionary, apparently. And the thing that surprises me most isn't how different it feels. It's how easy it is. Looking back, I don't regret forwarding that photo. I didn't twist the truth. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken. I showed reality to the people who'd been deliberately kept from it, and then I stepped back. He chose to live a double life. I just stopped covering for it. And here's the lesson I wish someone had told me sooner. If someone is comfortable humiliating you publicly, they've already decided you're optional. If they ask you to keep their lies safe, they don't respect you. They're outsourcing their integrity. And if the truth ruins their life, it's because the life they were living couldn't survive honesty. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I didn't chase explanations, beg for accountability, or stay silent to preserve someone else's image. I protected myself. I trusted what I saw. I kept the receipts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting, confronting, or spiraling. Sometimes it's forwarding one photo to the right people and letting the truth do the rest. If this story resonated with you, thank you for listening. And if you've ever been made to feel crazy for noticing what's right in front of you, trust yourself. Because clarity isn't cruel. It's freedom.